I wish I knew more about music theory and even instruments to be able to talk more about what I'm actually hearing here, but hello everyone, welcome to this 200 subscribers special. I did indeed say that I was going to be scaling the video production back a little bit, but I thought it'd just be a good thing to do once I hit 200 subscribers, to look through some of my favourite creations. This is actually something that I've been thinking of doing for quite some time. It's probably more suitable for a video of, a celebration rather, of 500 or 1000 subscribers, but I guess this is as good a time as any, and indeed I think it's actually valuable to dwell on the things that we enjoy more. We should do that more often, especially in these times. There are several categories, for example, music, art, film, literature and games, and I've chosen 3. Now I want to clarify that not all of these choices are my favourites in each category. A lot of them are, so I'll try not to ramble. Essentially what I'm going to do is, the 3 that I've chosen for each category, I'm hoping that they will in some way elucidate the other word philosophy, not just of this channel, but of my, just in general, what I value, and just the reason for why I create what I create. So I guess without any further discussion, let's step through the portal and look through some of my favourite creations. So we're going to start off with games. I'm choosing this category because it's not as important to me overall compared to the other categories. And I want to clarify as well that the choices aren't necessarily ranked. They're basically in the order that I've wrote them down in. So beginning with Gorogoa, I would struggle to think of another game that fits more with the other word philosophy and aesthetic and the idea of everything that I create. It's this fantastic puzzle game. It's so unique in it's designed to change your perception. Of course, this relates a lot to what I write about in terms of escapism and portals and looking through to other realities. It's set up into 4 panels. It's a panel puzzle game, and all you need to do is essentially move pieces of these different panels around, and it's deceptively simple, but it is one of the most clever gaming experiences that I've ever had. You play as this young boy who's on a spiritual quest to try and essentially connect with this god figure called Gorogoa during a time of war. It's almost fractal in the way that it's set out. The game is set out. Each of these puzzles, although there's only 4 puzzles, 4 panels in the puzzle for each section, there's a sense of depth that's just unparalleled. It's quite fascinating just how much you can zoom into each layer. I think it's almost like a kind of like a mandala effect, if I'm using that word correctly. It's fascinating just how much you can delve into these. It's like each panel is a world in and of itself, or even a universe in and of itself. It just captures this feeling of a boy using his imagination to look into other realities. There's certain moments where you can place a door over a wall. It can step through that wall. It's very much related to this Portals art project that I'm thinking about doing. It doesn't feel like you're playing a game at all. It's extraordinary. The next game on the list is The Longing. Now I have spoken about this before, so I'll try and be a little bit brief. The Longing is just, again, I feel like I value games that are more like experiences, where you feel like you're not playing a game, where you're just fully immersed in the world. The Longing is, as I've said before on the channel, about a little character called a Shade, whose task is simply to wait for his king to awaken from slumber. All you do in this game is walk very, very slowly, perform actions very, very slowly, through a seemingly infinite cave system. The game can take more than a year to complete if you wait for that amount of time. However, you can do things in the game to increase your time. And in fact, you can actually complete the game rather quickly if you know certain routes and options. I completed it in maybe 2 weeks or so, or maybe even a bit less. The Longing, again, just coming back to the philosophy of the channel, it's just this experience of observing, being at one with a given place, playing this game in the dark, hearing the Shade's footsteps, the sound of water droplets, the snoring of the king as you ascend the stairs to go from your home out into this world, the caves which seem like a world. It's just this, it puts you into a mindset of really appreciating. It develops your art of noticing. Now this next game, I put it into a different category. I'm smiling because it's the game of my life essentially, even though I don't play it anymore. I grew up with the game. Not a single day goes past without me thinking about it in some respect, and that is genuinely true. World of Warcraft. I played this game when I was 13 years old, 2006. I started on November 15th, 2006. I got it for my birthday, day before. It's extremely difficult for me to get across how I feel about this game. In some sense, it's not a game. It is a world. It's a second home, despite the fact that I've not played it for several years now. Many people think of games as just these kind of throwaway experiences. MMORPGs are coherent experiences. You play one single character for a very, very long time. You experience the world with millions of other players, essentially. But for me, playing it when I was just entering teenage years, for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours each day, it was formative in the most fundamental sense. I write about this, of course, on my essay related to ecocentrism in virtual worlds for the ecological citizen. It sparked within me an interest in nature, fantasy, mythology, legend, ecocentrism. I would not be the person I am today without World of Warcraft. The books on the shelf, posters in the background, the certificate above my head relating to ecology. I would not be the person I am today without this game. And thankfully, some people that developed the game know this, because I sent them my essay, and I'm very, very happy that that's the case. World of Warcraft, I really can't say much more than that. Moving on to the category of art, this was admittedly difficult to choose, and now my first choice is a painting by Beksinski. Most of his work is untitled, but this one is AA78. I call it Portal AA78. Now there is a painting by Beksinski behind me, to my left I believe it should be, or my right. It's the figure with the walking cane, the shrouded figure with the walking cane, walking a dog of night, or in fact he looks like a wolf rather, and there's a kind of a almost looks like a tower block, so it's rather fitting for some of my stories. That's why I have it on my wall there. But my favourite Beksinski painting by far is AA78. This work combines everything for me. It's actually one of the inspirations for my symbol, the other word symbol. It combines nature, architecture, portals. There's a darker element as well with the kind of blood red fungi as well, which most of my creations, I deliberately choose them, and I have indeed deliberately chosen them in this video to contrast darkness with light, with pessimism and optimism. This contrast between night and day, the stars and the cloudless sky. It feels like this architecture has been dreamed up by someone. It has that kind of non-Euclidean feel to it, and I can never really wrap my head around it. And with a Beksinski painting, of course, you're not really supposed to. So it's a wonderful painting. It's a dark painting, but it has this glimmer of hope. The next painting is none other than Alan Lee's Grey Havens. I could have chosen many Alan Lee paintings, but this one, as you might be not surprised to see, relates to the crossing of boundaries, the kind of narrowing of the straits towards the west, this voyage into hope, into solace and consolation. Melancholy feeling of departure, but also that sense of all fears being washed away. It is pure dream. The statues themselves look like they're crafted out of the stuff of dreams, a kind of bluish tinge to them. There's no better subject that fits with the medium of watercolour. The god rays there shining down, the pure point of light towards which the ship is heading. And the hobbits there, watching the departure. Statuary, trees, voyage, crossing the threshold to another world. My third choice for a painting is one of the images that I'm quite fond of. It means quite a lot to me, but despite that, for some reason I'm not quite sure who the artist is, nor the title. I'm not quite sure why. I can never find it. It's quite an obscure work of art. It's this figure standing in a nighttime scene out in nature. It has a kind of a severe quality to it, quite an austere quality to it. The figure sort of blends into the night, but his head is a crown, or not even a crown. His entire face, his entire face is a flame in brilliant light, and it represents for me anxiety, but it also represents hope and passion and desire. The flame, the creative fire. Moving on to films now. I'm aware that I've not really talked about films or other creations on this channel. I think I might, in the future perhaps, make individual videos talking about things other than books, although I of course I have talked about games and other things in my more casual vlogs, but outdoor vlogs, but I think I might make reviews for other types of creations. But moving on to my first choice for films, Every Star by Yawen Zheng. I wish I had created this, if I'm being honest. Although I do tend to have a darker tinge to my aesthetics and what I create often. This is a very kind film. It's only about maybe 3 or 4 minutes, but it really does represent what I value. In fact, it was one of the inspirations for the last story that I attempted to write, Aspire Arthur, which is a play on aspire, an architectural spire, and the word aspire. So I won't go into the specifics of the film as much because it's such a short experience, and I would like you to watch it for yourself. It's about this boy who's looking out from a drab tower block, kind of a dreary cityscape, and this letter comes to him from a far off place, from another world, from the other side, and it's given to him by this other figure, this magical figure, this other figure who sends word, who sends more than a word. In fact, he sends almost a piece of his own land, brightening the drab, ugly cityscape. This next film I've talked about on the channel before, so I won't go into it so much, but it's The Man Who Planted Trees by John Giono. Of course, it was originally a book, a short book. It was turned into a film in the 80s, French-Canadian production. For me, this film represents striving, endeavour, relationship with nature. It has everything, really. It's the character's disposition as well. His job is essentially taken on entirely by himself, just to plant this majestic forest in a desolate vale. And the film's story, it's such a simple conceit. It just concerns this wanderer who comes upon this shepherd who is planting oak trees. And from there, many years pass and they become great friends. And the man who planted trees, the man who plants trees in the film, Elzéar Bouffier, he brings hope back to this place. The community is desolate. It's full of hate and scorn. And I'm thinking, every creation that I value most of all, I realise that it has that positive denouement. It's a light at the end of the tunnel. I can't really see, although I've read darker works and some horror occasionally, I can't see why I would ever really connect with a work that is dark for darkness' sake, that kind of acerbic, nihilistic, pessimistic quality. There has to be this meaning to it, this higher purpose. The Man Who Planted Trees by Jean Giono. It was difficult to choose a third film. I'm not sure this choice is as solidified as the other ones on the list, but my choice is Pan's Labyrinth. And although I'm not a fan of horror, the reason I've chosen this film is because, again, it blends fantasy with reality. I much prefer non-secondary world fantasy. It's a horror film in a sense, but it has this childlike quality to it. It has this leaning toward wonder and enchantment, which I think kind of pushes it over the edge for me. And I've always enjoyed the film. I've seen it maybe 5 times or so. Again, if you've not seen the film, I'm not going to spoil it too much, but there is a kind of another positive outcome. Includes everything really: books, magic, nature, architecture in the form of the kind of the monolithic structure, the pan as well, the faun rather. There's even a melancholy tinge to it. Maybe it is a good choice because I can't really think of another film that would work so well to kind of illustrate the philosophy of this channel, the aesthetics of this channel, and just what I value and the reasons why I create what I create. So what I find really interesting about the film and what I love about it is that it blends fantasy with reality. It as this war is going on, it's set during Franco's reign, and I believe it's about a handful of years after the Civil War. All of this is happening in the background. It's in some ways it's integral to the story, but it largely happens in the background. And the film concerns a young girl called Ophelia, and her interactions with a magical creature called the faun. We simply know him as the faun, and Ophelia is deemed to be a princess from the subterranean kingdom. It's essentially a quest narrative where she has to fulfill a variety of tasks. And that's all I'll say, really. It combines darkness and light. It combines reality with fantasy. Pan's Labyrinth by Guillermo del Toro. Literature. So, I think, other than music, perhaps, literature has been the most difficult, and there are many, many novels and indeed novellas and short stories that I could have chosen. I think naturally there's going to be a lot of overlap here, so I will try and be a little bit brief, but I have to say my first choice is Gormenghast, of course. Gormenghast by Mervyn Peake. I can't speak highly enough of Gormenghast. I've said it multiple times on the channel, ad nauseum at this point. Gormenghast concerns a young boy called Titus Groan, who grows up in a strange, dark, seemingly infinite castle, having to fulfill these traditions and customs that no one even really knows why they're even accomplished. They just do them. It's kind of by rote, by memory. It's about yearning. It's about, again, the desire for something more. Titus Groan wishes to leave. Even Lord Sepulcrave, who is one of my favourite characters in fiction, although he's been brought up in Gormenghast, studying the laws of Gormenghast from dusty tomes and whatnot for many, many, many years. He has this glimmer of hope within him, despite the fact that he's the melancholy Earl, the quintessential melancholy character for me. He has this love of books. I get goosebumps when I think about Gormenghast. It has everything for me. It's this masterful work. It's darkness, melancholy, but also comedy and kind of an airy quality to it as well. Gormenghast. My second choice is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Of course, there are many, many books I could have chosen, many, many works of fiction. Piranesi perhaps best suits my philosophy, the reason for why I create. It concerns ideas of escape, the creation of other worlds, loci of the imagination, architecture, idealism. It's not my favourite work of fiction, but it is very well suited. Again, I won't say too much regarding spoilers, but it concerns this man, this very gentle and kind man who simply wants to figure out why he is in this house. He wants to learn more about it. He takes the house for what it is. He appreciates the beauty of the house. But there is this other figure called simply the Other, and he might hold the secrets as to what this infinite house actually is, where he might actually be. I highly recommend watching my review of that, and indeed my my brother reviewed it on the channel as well. So, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Now, some of you may be surprised that my third choice for a work of fiction, a work of literature, is nothing by Tolkien, not the Silmarillion or Lord of the Rings or anything like that. This really is about my interest in yearning and creation and portals and journeys to other worlds, crossing the other side, things like this. So for that reason I'm choosing Clark Ashton Smith's The City of the Singing Flame. This story is rather personal to me, the meaning that I put into it. It concerns a fantastic fiction author called Angarth, who enters a portal in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and he's lured toward a city, a strange city, by a voice, a song, this haunting voice, and he journeys over several days towards the center of the city, and he comes to a kind of temple or shrine, and there he beholds a great plume of green flame. And I won't say much more than that. The story for me is all about creative desire, yearning, disillusion even, about release. It's such a good example of what I am going to be talking about in my thesis, and in fact I used it as a prime example of escape in my The Gate Within essay that I've talked about on the channel before. Well, it really is just a perfect encapsulation of my ideas, and I was I was almost stunned to read it when I read it maybe about close to 2 years ago now. The City of the Singing Flame by Clark Ashton Smith. On to music now. This is going to be a little bit different from my other categories in that I'm actually going to be listening to a little bit of each song. Now, music is something I've not really talked about on the channel too much. As with most people, music is a very personal thing. Sometimes it's so personal that it's even difficult to talk about. For me, I can summarize my appreciation of music by saying that it's all of the songs that I listen to, they correspond to my interests. Some people obviously listen to music in a very kind of general way. They don't, it doesn't really cohere with their passions. But for me, essentially every song I listen to is either related to nature, myth, legend, even philosophy, or works of literature, things like this. And so as you can imagine, I had quite a bit of difficulty for two of the choices for music. One of the choices was I didn't even have to think about, but I'll get onto that in a second. My first choice will be Peter Bjargo's Imprisonment of the Mind. Peter Bjargo is sui generis, I think. I don't think there's anyone quite like him. He has many art projects. Arcana, Sophia, Peter Bjargo, the solo project. His work ranges from the neoclassical to dark wave to themes of esotericism, fantasy, mental health, things like this. And since 2013 I've listened to Arcana and then branched out into his other projects as well. Just reading the first verse, freedom, a word made of pulverized dreams. Our dreams are the only thing we have left that they can't take away. With my hands tied behind my back, I can only but sit down and watch you destroy it all. It's a very inspirational song. I've used this in many productions. I've listened to this hundreds upon hundreds of times, and there's a certain movement to it very inspirational. It feels like striving, it feels like yearning. It almost exalts dreams. The drums there as well has a sense of escape. There's a kind of bitterness to his voice, but also a daring quality. Arcana and Peter Bjargo, the two main projects led by Peter Bjargo, often have a kind of a mantra-like quality to their songs. A lot of repeating elements. It's one of my favourite songs of all time. It's difficult to listen to this without getting emotional. He's exalting the imagination, dreams, the quintessential escape. This next song is a song from a genre that has a rather poor perception, in that it's considered cheesy, it's considered a bit over the top, and that is true in many respects, but some songs in particular, some bands rather, they don't necessarily have to be about the slaying of dragons and kind of cliches or anything like that. But for me, my choice will be Blind Guardians and Then There Was Silence. This is one of my favourite songs of all time. It's a 14-minute epic. It's from the very moment that it begins, it announces that it has begun. It's just this phenomenal experience where it takes you on a journey. There's a lot of textural variation, many different instruments and different layers, and it's about the legend of Troy. It features figures like Cassandra. I believe there's allusions to Aeneas as well, mentions of Rome. There's one part in particular, although it doesn't relate specifically to my ideas of portals and the other side and yearning, I sort of put that meaning onto it. In the song, I believe it's referring to death, but or the underworld. But for me, it represents just this yearning for the other side, for crossing into the world of fantasy and wonder and enchantment. But we'll get to that. Let's have a listen to the very beginning. Again, from the very start, it announces what's to come. Hansi Kursch is the vocalist. Very well known and very well respected icon of the scene. It's almost this triumphant sound to it. It just feels like a journey. Very inspirational. It's just this epic sound to it. This part coming up is one of my absolute favourite moments in any song. Out of reach. Welcome to the end. It's proclamation. The flutes, the layered vocals, everything. Death's a certain thing, and the other world appears. And then there was silence, just a voice from the other world. Like a leaf in an icy world, memories will fade. Misty tales and poems lost, all the bliss and beauty will be gone. I'm not sure where this will end up in the video, but I've saved this for last. This is my favourite piece of music. It transcends even those songs that I would consider to be my favourite songs in terms of just bands or projects. For me, it goes beyond that several orders of magnitude. For me, it's a song that I struggle even to listen to. Sometimes I test myself just clicking it on YouTube or wherever it might be, and I can only listen to maybe a handful of seconds before I have to go off because it's simply too evocative, too emotional. And of course it's related to World of Warcraft. The song Teldrassil, I refer to it as Teldrassil. It has various names, various versions, but it's simply called Teldrassil. It is the music of the Night Elves, essentially. Certain forest zones in the World of Warcraft in Azeroth. To me, this is a sound of home. I often think of Teldrassil in my mind as a kind of locus, a sort of dreamlike place. There are many parts to the song that just move me beyond words. I wish I knew more about music theory and even instruments to be able to talk more about what I'm actually hearing here, but the quintessential journey through the magical forest. I first heard these sounds when I was 13 years old, and have stuck with me ever since. 29 in November. It's the music of Teldrassil. It's not overstated, it's not bombastic. It's a sound to me of pure enchantment. It's tempting almost to just play this for as long as it goes and just to talk about it, but the video will be far too long. So I'll leave it there. Hopefully you enjoyed that, everyone. Hopefully it made you think about your own relationship with different creations. Hopefully it made you think about what you appreciate about them. Thanks for watching. Until next time.